Hello, hello, hello. It's Monday, fun day again. It is January 30th, and today is a little bit of a difficult day. Um, Last week, I announced Grandma Amy Phillips has transitioned from this earth. And it's been a little difficult dealing with that, combined with some undue stress that I was already encountering and dealing with, or whatever. And yeah, so I'm going to try to get through this because this is important. Um, it's ironic because before I mentioned that Grandma Annie passed just before she died, um, I was speaking to a future viewer regarding grief. Then here we are dealing with grief. We were aware that there was some things going on that Grandma Annie was not long for this earth, but anyway, I appreciate the prayers and everyone is, you know, constantly, giving their condolences and shout out for, our family strength and endurance during this time. Hi, Sean Anthony. Stick around. So this week, before I open up the conversation dealing with grief as a result of an extension to a conversation I had with a viewer, this week, I will try to sum up things and introduce a new perspective on common behavior. I always resort to my notes because I write these things out before the show, um, because I like to try to make sure that I stay on topic and reach and tie up as many loose ends as I can during the one show. Okay, now continuing on with tools of division, which was what I spoke about last week. If you missed last week's episode, you can watch it after this. You won't miss anything. It's just an extension of what I spoke about, which will, watching the last episode will bring a bit more of a rounded clarity to what I'm saying this week. But I always challenge viewers to watch each of my episodes at least three different times with three different perspectives as a mental improvement challenge. So, watching this episode will only give you more insight on changing your perspective the next time you watch the same episode. I love the way the mind works, and I'm always interested in seeing how the um, challenge will go, how people will say that the challenge went for them. But anyway, so, okay, again, I appreciate you all bearing with me. I want to go ahead and get through this. It's an emotional time, but I just want to go ahead and try to continue to get through this. I'm trying to read my notes at the same time. So pardon me, pardon me. I'm reading my notes. Okay, so gotta see the note. Um, of course, I'm a psychologist, so it's always interesting for me to see how people deal with the different perspectives mentally. Um, and the reason why I'm dealing more with mental awareness and mental health is because it's a lot of people, not just my family, that's grieving consistently back to back, dealing with loss of family, and that has a psychological impact that a lot of people aren't abruptly aware of. And it takes place over a period of time where you're like, oh man, I didn't realize that I was that impacted by what happened. So, mental health awareness is a running theme in adroit living because how can you live adroitly if you cannot get past the mental obstacles that impede your ability to be clever and witty and skillful with your hands? Okay, so anyway, continuing with tools of division. Also, make sure you join me in the comments and interact. This is an interactive show, and I always put the comments on the screen so you can watch comments and I can respond. But anyway, continuing with tools of division. Faith groups are divided by moral principles, and principles are pressed in workplace culture as well as social norms and customs and social culture. The rabbit hole or the distraction is trying to make it make sense that the diversity is somehow a color of skin. That's what I was trying to express last week. It is not a color of skin. Again, I encourage you to go back and review last week's episode. Um, Education plays a role in this, but we may not be ready for that conversation. But that's a lot to unpack. But recognizing everything I've said, we can admit how schools sample from those other learned behaviors. Schools sample from um, churches, social media, um, different groups of faith, non-faith, etc. So school is common to understand and make the connection that schools are also exhibiting these problems, and because this, schools are where the children work. That's school work. That's where they work. So these mental problems are also exhibiting themselves in the children in schools. But again, that's a lot to unpack, and I'm not trying to get too deep with that particular aspect right now. Anyway, um, I'm just tired of people trying to make everyone choose a color of skin or culture like it's a panacea of how people are going to get along best when it doesn't make sense. No one can change the color of their skin, but people do change their moral compass, and some people should be safely placed in a position where they can do that, but it's not based on skin color. It's not about genetics either. Yeah, I think I think knowing personally is an interesting. Knowing personality is an interesting way to track one's moral compass, and how the moral compass may change or impact their decisions or behaviors, etc. But it's not to say personality traits or assessments are completely accurate and a proper tool for division. A lot of people are using it for a tool of division. The personality assessment tests are not a set rule for how people should be divided. It's just, more often than not, it's for fun. A lot of people use it on social media, and they take a personality test and they say, "Oh, I'm a Virgo." Or they look at astronomy and look at the stars and say, "Oh, I'm a Virgo, and I can't get along with, whoever the other astronomy sign is or whatever." A lot of times people take these things a little too much to heart, and they miss out on a lot of opportunities. For example, some people, they think that their love is someone who the astronomy stars or whatever have suggested that it is. And then they later find, after divorcing or getting out of a bad relationship with that sign, they find love with the person, the exact person that the stars said they can't find love with or they won't get along with. And then it's like, wow, my moral compass, inadvertently changed according to how my feelings changed according to how I was treated by that person from that particular sign. So a lot of things that are normally taken or should be taken lightly because it's administered with, a little light levity in it to try to guide you, but not direct you, if that makes sense. It's trying to guide you, but not instruct you to say, okay, this is what you must do. It's trying to gently guide you and say, well, maybe try this, as opposed to, no, you must do it this way. So it's not a tool of division. I think the best tool for dividing people is either you choose to try to get along or you choose not to, period. There is no other way. All the global studies I've read in life, well, that's the resounding conclusion to all the studies I've read over my lifetime, which is a whole lot of global studies, because I was interested in industrial organizational psychology, which leads to a global economy. So you can't box yourself in. And when you're talking about a global economy, you're talking about whether a lot of people realize it or not, you're talking about where um, and I love it because I was able to study how a lot of different cultures really include their faith in their business practices, and a lot of people are unaware of that. And for a long time, Americans were trying to conduct business with people overseas, and they had no idea that a lot of the behavior they exhibit has not just to do with respect of person, but respect of faith. And it weaves in really well with the business plan and the business model and how it is successful and generates global attention because it's so successful. But this is how they did it. And this is why some places like Walmart, when Walmart was trying to break into different industries overseas, different locations overseas, they had to use different industries that were already over there in order to get their foot in the door because their moral compass was classified as being unethical. And they did not want anything to do with that. And a lot of people thought, oh, it's a sure thing that you'll be able to be with Walmart. Yeah, everybody loves Walmart. Put one over here in Indonesia. And they're like, yeah, we don't agree with um, your moral business practices. So we don't want you over here. So that's when Americans began to really see and understand how the moral compass was actually the dividing tool between success and failure and being able to be welcomed into a area or work environment. So the moral compass, even though it's controversial, it's extremely controversial, and I understand that, but a lot of people don't feel like it's controversial. A lot of people meaning it's not a global mentality that is controversial. It is more of a America type of it's controversial. But anyway, that has been the tool of division from what I've studied. Especially, once researchers put the outliers back into their equations of their original study instead of just using the outliers as separate studies for phenomenon study, researchers should acknowledge their phenomenon study was built from a completely off-topic theory and field of study where they were building on clarity, clarifying the discovery of a phenomenon discovered by chance, like when they discovered that, Walmart was not able to break into an industry because the moral compass was skewed. That study you know, should have had a whole bunch of branches to that tree. But what they do with studies, instead of branching it off, they just start a whole nother study, and it doesn't have the proper uh, attention that it should have because it's like, oh, well, we discovered it by chance. It was totally off topic. And, well, it was a phenomenon. So we threw out the outliers and focused on what it was that we wanted to instead of saying, okay, we'll put a pin in it, circle back, and then we'll, figure that out. I think, in my opinion, if that was done, we'd be a lot further in desirable improvements. It's not so much that we want change, more so than we want desirable improvements. A lot of people say, "Oh, change, that was Obama's running thing. Change, change, that was a great thing," but change does not always equal desirable improvement, if that makes sense. And desirable improvements is not necessarily recreating the wheel. And a lot of times people say, well, change is more equal to recreating the wheel. It's not so either. But anyway, but for some reason, going back to the idea of researchers, some doctors and doctoral candidates, scholars, scientists, researchers, and practitioners fight to match wits to prove intelligent superiority, meaning they focus on superficial differences or aspects that mislead future studies, prolonging studies' desirable outcomes, which is likely where the phrase change takes a long time to come, because this was the means of prolonging change, predicting response loopholes, then um, presenting pseudo false changes. Pseudo means false changes as changes the people were asking for, meaning people before they presented the change that the people were asking for, they took a long time so they could find loopholes and skirt the real desired change, and then present it to the people once they've figured out the loopholes to it. They will present it to the people as if it was the change they asked for. This is a format of false problem solving that needs to change, because businesses are failing as a result of following these wayward business practices. It's not done anyone any good, and it oftentimes leads to people who would maybe otherwise choose to practice more ethically sound uh, business decisions and practices. It makes them feel like, oh, okay, I can get away with it. This is easier. Let's just do it this way. And then blame it on the system. And it's like, no, we got to change that because um, when the crap starts to roll downhill, sometimes you'll find that it rolled on you because you didn't realize the shift. And this is how you could prevent that. And I wouldn't want to see anyone, even if somebody says, oh, they deserve it, I wouldn't want to see anyone get um, hurt or lose their livelihood or whatever. That's just terrible. It's avoidable, but people feel comfortable um, behaving in a particular way that puts them in such jeopardy because yeah, that's the way it works. That's the way it happens. That's the norm. Let's just do it this way, and that's just ridiculous. It has to change, and the more awareness that's brought to it, it will change. Like I stated last week, a lot of global attention get into these issues, these legacy problems. Legacy meaning it's historical. It has deep roots. It's like a generational curse. It's so deep. It's like the elephant in the room. No one's going to mention it. So you get the point. It needs to change. But um, you understand, do you understand what a algorithm is and what it does and what isomorphism is and absorptive capacity? I'll circle back to this later. But getting back to the division tools, so stay tuned. I'm gonna get to that. But getting back to the division tools, the culture of confusion and rabbit holes is more popular than any culture in the world noted in the past and now. Imagine that. Go on, try to imagine it and see that that has been one of those elephants in the rooms, one of those staples, one of those cornerstones that people are building false foundations on is the culture of confusion, the rabbit hole. And it, generations, each generation tends to address it differently to acknowledge that it's happening. They'll say, look, squirrel. And then they'll say rabbit hole. They'll say things like, oh, that's a magic trick, sleight of hand, things like that. That has been so deeply rooted in so many things. It's like it's even in business management practices where they're doing this sleight of hand and the perpetuating the culture of confusion. Okay, so now that you've imagined it, uh, oh hi Ty, thank you for coming. Thanks for the love. Let me go right now. Okay, so what was that popular? Oh, the culture of confusion and rabbit holes is more popular than any other culture in the world, noted in the past and now. Notice the strong trending phrase, make it make sense. And that trending phrase about other cultures replacing white culture, confusion is historic, not just a current trend, but now it is more deadly that this confusion, this culture of confusion, is causing mental problems that people cannot live through. So that brings on the awareness that we really need to stop with the culture of confusion. It's literally killing people. It's causing people to feel like they need to do something in order to protect themselves, and it's not so. Hey Jackie, thank you for coming, sis. I appreciate you. My sister, that y'all saw Jackie. Jackie's a wonderful person. And she her beautiful testimony. And we will get back to her. We'll circle back. But it's a lot going on in everybody's life. And a lot of times, everyone needs some time to collect their emotions. Normally, I'm fairly good with uh, collecting my emotions and being business oriented because I was conditioned from a child in business be men, and that was scripture. As you know, if you're a viewer, you know already. Jackie, know I'm a church girl. I grew up. I was born and raised in church. So, with that being said, a lot of the things that were pushed, oppressed, or conditioned was the thought that you could do all things through Christ, and you can press on and go to church when you're sick as a dog and you're throwing up and it's coming out of both ends and all ends, but you're still pressing to make it to church and smiling and singing praise God. And when people ask you how you doing, you say blessed and highly favored. So this is just the norm. This is just the norm. So people may see my smile. I know, right, Jackie? You've been in church for a long time. You know how this go. So it's like, regardless of the smile, just like a clown with a painted smile on his face, it's something beneath the smile. But people got to press on. People have to press on. But anyway, back to the topic. Morality, culture, gender, titles of faith, and status, and meanings of definition, they all change over time. One thing that doesn't change is the I am, the Alpha and Omega, the omnipresent, omniscient, timeless, sovereign God who loves us all so much that he gives us time and grace to make desirable changes, even though he knows what the end will be. That kind of logic makes me comfortable with making decisions and even making mistakes and openly admitting my mistakes and repenting. Taking accountability for both positive and negative actions is not easy, but knowing all things work together for the good of them that love the Lord makes it possible to endure whatever, meaning it makes it a mental difference. It's a psychological difference that's happening with people who have this mentality, with people who are expressing that they have a faith that's deeply rooted and unmovable. What did it say, Jackie? Bound and unmovable, unchanged, unwavering. There's nothing gonna make you go differently despite what's going on in your life. Knowing and enduring patterns is a great example. So let's circle back to the earlier question. Do you understand what an algorithm is and what it does and what isomorphism is and absorptive capacity? What you say? What you say, Jackie? Unmovable, baby. They don't know. They don't know. They're gonna learn. They're gonna learn though. When they seeing that yes, it is possible to be going through a great deal of stress and emotions, but you still unmovable. You still gotta keep on pressing. You still gotta do what you gotta do. You can be sick unto death and on your deathbed, but you still gotta keep on going. What Job do? What Job do? Unwavering, unmovable. Okay, so anyway, do you understand what algorithm is? And so I'm going to explain that. It's all structured and learned widely acceptable behavior and predictable patterns of behavior. I'll explain more. Just like I use with the faith and relating to Jackie about how a lot of people of faith say, hey, this is the way I was conditioned. This is just the way it's going to be. And when I get alone, that's when I'm going to be emotional or deal with my emotions or whatever. This is the idea in these in isomorphism and absorptive capacity. Learn the devil will have people to think things they're supposed to do or expected to do, but out of order. He'll have you doing things out of order, which is not of God because it causes confusion, and confusion is not of God. An example of this is when Adam and Eve ate of the tree of knowledge when they were told not to. Have you ever had a child to eat some sweets out of proper sequence or against instructions? Or have you had a pet that found their food and ate outside of their learned pattern? Then you can imagine eating outside of expected and learned patterns as directed is a common practice, which dates all the way back to Adam and Eve. And dealing with growing, developing, and maturing, or as a result of the learning and encoding process. What you say, Jackie? Or eat dessert for dinner? Hey, sometimes just to be a little fun, I'll eat breakfast for dinner or dinner for breakfast, and yeah, dessert is definitely included in being eaten out of progress, out of sequence. But that's a learning process where you have to learn that this is why you don't do that. Because if you do this, this will happen. Either way, the point is crap happens outside of your design and desire. Sometimes prematurely acting can lead to bad things happening, and sometimes it can be a correction to previous flaws. So it's like, okay, I did this out of sequence, so now I have to do this, and it's supposed to correct that flaw. So watching this episode 3 different times is going to make this section of thought more thought provoking than other sections, but hang in there. See the way you see the way an individual reacts or responds to stimuli or things is very telling of their character and future behaviors. I love psychology. It's like a puzzle studying the human behavior, and I really enjoy it. Anyway, some clever people decided to make a pattern of behavior where computers became globally popular, or almost everyone had access to a computer device. Now, I'm going to date myself, but I, back in the 80s, computers were like being introduced to public schools, and they were the teachers and everybody were it was very controversial. So it did take a while for it to become as popular as it is today, but the evolution and tracking it in my opinion is rather fascinating. Anyway, sometimes it seems like people are not ready for conversations like this because it's popular to chase rabbits, hurt people's feelings, and play on other people's emotions for profit. So we can't get past superficial issues to move forward with more interesting things. It took a long time for computers to be introduced and become as popular because people were stuck on things like that. And it's like, as long as we continue to stay stuck, progression or desirable changes or improvements will be slower to come. You don't have to be a genius to know when one song is coming to an end and another song is beginning, or when a joke ran too long, or to know when to stop running. You don't need to be a genius to realize change is coming. However, it pays to be prayed up enough to predict what changes is coming, because a lot of times you know a change is coming, but you don't know what, because change is inevitable. But what's going to happen? And is the change going to be a desirable change? How's it going to impact you? And will you be um, required to do anything different because change happens? It all depends. Sometimes a lot of people, especially with these different communities that come up, they don't change who they are. They just more upfront about who they are. which in my opinion is helpful because yeah, tell me who you are. If that's who you want me to call you, that's what you want me, how you want me to treat you, tell me. I don't have a problem with it. Um, as long as we both know who we're talking to and what we're dealing with. That's all I'm saying. So if you're a QAnonist, but we're business partners, I don't care. We got along before it. We can get along after it, and we'll get along through it. If you are discovering or coming out and saying that you're a part of the LGBTQIA, I won't continue that, but you're a part of that community. I don't care. How is that going to change our interactions? If I loved you before I knew, I'm gonna love you after I know. I'm not going to shun you. Just like originally, some odd years ago in church, the girls sometimes would get pregnant out of proper sequence, even in the Muslim faith and Jehovah's Witness. And the other girls couldn't talk to that person. And it was like, how can you choose to cut your feelings off from loving that person and that person being your friend because they got pregnant before they were supposed to? So I've always been controversial. I never picked. I cannot pick. I can't choose one over the other because it's contrary to what I was conditioned and read and learned in the Bible. And what that said was, you know, um, it says, do unto others as you would have others to do unto you. It says, with loving kindness have I drawn thee. It's telling us that we should love our neighbors and to include love our enemies. So how can you validate choosing and still feel like this is logical? I've never been able to make sense of it. If it doesn't make sense and it's confusing, I'm not a part of it. So I continue on. Anyway, that reminds me, you know why people go to priests to pray for them? Because the prayers of the righteous avails much. You know why people were set up when they learned, you know why people were upset when they learned the sins of some priests and nuns? Because the betrayal was knowing they were not righteous enough to absolve them of their sins because their own sins. So now followers didn't know how to trust to help them to, with their spiritual journey. It was other reasons too, but dealing with this betrayal was the most powerful and disturbing thing to deal with first. As a result, other changes were a little slower in some people's expressions of concerns and frustration resolving the issue. A lot of things that they felt should have taken place did not take place as fast as they would have liked to. But it was because a lot of people were just trying to deal with, oh my God, I'm not absolved of my sins. What must I do? However, in my opinion, people are human and have time for correction as long as they are alive. That's from my observations of what I've read and studied with uh, different faiths. So, even though the priest is more of a symbolic tool of strengthening one's faith, it is not the end all, the be all. Is not ingrained in stone that this is the way. So I think a lot of people realized that when they saw that, oh, knowing of the priest's sins and their inability to actually absolve you because their prayers weren't availing much, their prayers were probably availing as much as yours as a sinner, then it helped people to conclude that maybe they can pray for themselves. And a lot of other things happened, especially during the pandemic when a lot of people stopped attending church because of the pandemic and the spread. And they began to go on their own spiritual journey with guidance from those who had experience. And that's really what, in my opinion, should take place. You have guided perspective. It's not written in stone because no human has all the answers and everybody sins. So it's difficult for me to make logic of um, people choosing to have someone as a staple of this must be, as opposed to this is guided perspective. Try this. Here, this may help. Or I'm a pray with you, pray for you, but you must also pray. So it's a pattern. It's a pattern that mentally conditions people how to progress through life and life's difficulties and changes and deal with your emotions. When that pattern is understood, that that's the underlying base of all the mind that's presented, mental health improves because the dependency is a little bit more relaxed. It's still there and it'll always be required because the human hierarchy of needs. Now, we went over that. We went over a chart. You might want to circle back and go through those videos. The human hierarchy of needs dictates that you're going to want to have people, in your circle, people around you. So it's not necessarily a complete independence. It's just not a deep codependence where you cannot survive outside of depending on this person. Proves mental awareness and mental health. But again, that's just my perspective, my opinion, and the reason why. I believe when people love despite knowing others' transgressions, it leads to forgiveness and absolute resolution because knowing prevents room for reoccurrence because it removes the opportunity for repeating previous undesirable behaviors. But if priests can be forgiven for their transgressions, so their prayers will avail. Everyone can have their prayers avail, now understanding everyone needs grace, and yet God keeps blessing despite their needing grace because our efforts to try, despite how successful our attempts are. Um, but maybe we can get past things that hinder progression. Progression has a pattern to include behavioral patterns learned from institutions of faith. Take ownership of your actions, admit mistakes or weaknesses to avoid future occurrences, ask for forgiveness, and behave in accordance with your request to be forgiven and accept it as a new acceptable behavior. Don't continue on with the same behavior that caused you to have to ask for forgiveness and caused you to repent. So, this is something that you see even in business practices. This is a mental situation that's happening where a lot of people aren't vocalizing it, but you can see it in their behavior. You can see it in, oh, you're not smiling today. Oh, you smiling, but you're not acting right. You can see the signals, and the signals inform you what the next steps are or predict what they should probably be. It gives a good suggestion as to what it should probably be. Credible people and successful business practice um, this common behavior all the time, and that earns trust and loyalty, which is one of the things that I mentioned about why overseas business practices did not want to deal with any organization they found to have unethical business practices. So, so that helps you to circle, bring that to full circle. So just uh, sorry, I'm trying to go back to my notes. So despite knowing different ways to track behavior and maybe closely predict behavior, it doesn't recreate the historical successful winning practice we've learned from our spiritual journey. The spiritual journey dates back so far beyond people um, saying, okay, well, we're going to make schooling um, a, uh, what is it, a business practice. So before schooling was ever a business practice, schooling exists in faith practices because people were teaching the faith practices and teaching what was acceptable behavior, what was acceptable train of thought, what was acceptable, even in your dealing with your farming. That was business. That was a lot of business practice. And a lot of people, yeah, Jackie, exactly. When you know better, just do better. You don't have to be told to do better. But a lot of people use it as an excuse that, oh, well, I can always blame the system. Oh, well, I can always revert back to, something that was false, um, false foundation. Circle back if you missed that part. This is a very interesting conversation. Circle back and see what I'm saying about that. So the foundation was really rooted in faith and faith practices, because before anything, any business practice was something that, oh, that's an organizational or it's an industry no, it's an employment. No, these particular things were, it had a starting point. The starting point was deeply rooted in faith, spiritual awareness, and it branched off from there. And there's no getting away from that, because it feeds the whole man. You can't say, well, okay, well, I'm gonna conduct business practices even though it conflicts with your moral compass of present. You can say, oh, I'm go ahead and do it despite that conflict, and then you do it and you can't sleep. You do it and you can't eat. You do it and your mental health is off balance, and you're trying to figure out why. There we have it. There you have it. If you missed it, rewind. You're gonna get it. You're gonna get it. So, and sometimes it takes that third time, because yeah, sometimes the thought I'm thinking and I may not be conveying it in YouTube manner where it's like, okay, got it the first time. So definitely, use that mental challenge I have for you to watch these episodes at least 3 times with 3 different perspectives. Don't have the same perspective and expect the type of mental improvement that I'm trying to get you to lead you to. But if you don't want to watch it and you're struggling to watch it the first time, just fast forward through it and just watch me make stupid faces and say the same thing. But listen to the words, because a lot of times I know I can't listen to YouTube videos on regular speed. I have to fast forward, because sometimes YouTube, it makes you have to slow your speech down, which means a lot of times the speech is taking far longer than it would in a normal conversation, unless you're a gamer. If you're a gamer and you're watching the gamers, YouTubers, they talk fast and at a normal speed. But a lot of oftentimes you'll see where people are slowing down their speech, and you gotta kind of double speed it so that you can get through it and maintain your sanity. But anyway, 3 times, try it out. Accepting, you know, that this is the root, this is the foundation, and it's not going anywhere, regardless of how many times you try to replace it with false foundations. Um, it can bring a positive mental health perspective to many problems we face in life, and it can help when dealing with others. And that's where we have encountered a major problem, where it's now being presented to industries across genre that we must face or provide mental health care for everyone, regardless of who they are, because it's understood now that it impacts everyone. It's not just one person. Because somebody was mad at work, they went out. Oh no, let's go back to the theater shooting. That was a PhD student who was upset about his PhD program. And so he decided, people who had nothing to do with what he did. This was not even the 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 space where he encountered the traumatic stimuli. The traumatic problem that triggered him to respond in this fatal way. He was at school, had nothing to do with a theater. There was no relation there. So when we see cases like that, where there's absolutely no way to track that this would have happened, there's no way to show that this is what this person could have, thought to do. They might have been mad at school and went to the school and shot up whoever it was that made them mad. But it was no way to predict that, oh, okay, he's just going to randomly go out and start shooting up a theater. So some people say it was there, and the psychologist was able to track that, and had they did better, that it would have been preventable. But it's to say that outwardly, with outside of the confidentiality that a counselor provides their client. There was no way that outsiders could see that this person was having such a mental problem that this was going to be the result in a totally different area. Yes. Yeah, Jackie, exactly. Bad attitudes towards employees are contagious. Yes, they are. Like smiling, like laughing. It can impact someone in so many ways. So many ways. And now we're starting to understand, not we, but the global industry is starting to understand and respond and implement desirable changes and desirable improvements that will benefit in the manner in which will make it a lot safer in the future. But again, it's slow to change, it's slow to be implemented and practiced because, again, what I mentioned about researchers, and practitioners, the witness and the researcher getting involved in superficial arguments and not really focusing on ways to continue to make the progression that's necessary and continue on with phenomenological studies that would help inform um, best practices of those changes. So yes, Jackie, that's a great point. Change is inevitable, but desirable improvements are subjective. Therefore, it requires global awareness and collaboration to achieve because it is obtainable in this time. A lot of people don't believe that these changes are obtainable for the times that we're currently in because they're like, well, we got to keep working on this, we got to keep working on that. For example, um, a lot of times the reason why I don't talk about schools is because I'm trying to get this dissertation out and I don't want to have a bias. However, um, the evolution of schools um, moved from not having school as a real job to having schooling as a real job. But there was something that took place in between that. It was the manner that teaching was being done in a holistic way, that it was not being done later when it was deemed to be a traditional practice. For example, um, you have traditional brick and mortar schools, and you have it's ironic because it's like traditional school was actually homeschooling, and it still remains the most effective schooling practice there is because again it is a holistic method of uh, encoding, learning, and taking information in, using it according to the appropriate measures, and then exhibiting that you have learned. That's the encoding process. So when you exhibit that you learn, it wasn't always just so binary. It wasn't so narrow minded and linear. It's like trying to teach students math and they're telling you, well, this isn't going to help me in life. And then you're like, what do you mean? This is adding and subtracting. You need to know this. This is percentages. You need to know percentages because when you go to the store, people have sales and they take a certain percentage off. But the students cannot make the connection properly because the teaching is not done in a holistic manner most oftentimes, especially in public schools where the education is free. Again, I don't want to go down that path because I don't want people to feel like I have a bias. I don't care where you learn. You can be a self learner. I love those. I love people who learn on their own, and that's not just within the brick and mortar schools. That's people. Period. That's a mindset. That's a mental uh, uh, practice where people, no matter where they are, they take the information from everywhere, regardless of having instructed um, guidance from, okay, the teacher said I have to read this book. Yeah, but there's other things that you can also read and other things you can venture to learn. And those people are self learners, even though they're in what's called traditional school. Or whether they're homeschoolers, if they're homeschoolers, they already, that's just the norm for them. That's a normal practice for them that they're saying, well, I'm going to learn more about this. I really enjoyed learning this. I'm going to learn more because they are making the connection, a holistic connection, a connection that feeds the whole man, which edifies the whole man, grows the whole man. So you're not just learning in a linear with blinders on at like a horse running in a race, and you don't want that horse to be distracted by all the other distractors and stimuli outside of the objective. And the objective is to run the race and win the race. And you're like, oh, well, let's put blinders on the horse. Let's put blinders on the children and see how well that goes. But there were anomalies that did think outside the box. And when they started to grade children on a bell curve, they had to change things because that was a false foundation. And that false foundation is causing a lot of problems and it's causing a lot of people to revert back to practices or hybrid practices that will incorporate more of the holistic learning as opposed to being less holistic. So a lot of people are fighting against online schooling for elementary and adolescents, let's say it that way, for adolescents. But that's really where things were progressing. It was in the pipeline prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has expedited a number of things that were in the pipeline to take place. And those things were attached to desirable changes that people were requesting to be improved. The changes that took place needed improvements. And that's why, you know, a lot of these things were even there for the pandemic students to have to fall back on when the traditional brick and mortar schools shut down. What you say, Jackie? My daughter is all A's in public school. She had these questions too. As far as they do. Yeah. And you know what? I love that in you. And that is definitely, again, a conditioned learned response. But a lot of times, in us perpetuating those conditional responses, we inadvertently, not on purpose, we inadvertently overlook what the child is saying and why it's a problem. So yeah, you can thrive and you can make it and everything in these different atmospheres. But a lot of times children are crying out because they're afraid something is going wrong, something's abnormal. Um, my sons, when they were taking in traditional brick and mortar school, they would come home and sometimes they'll be home all day. But at night when I would read to them, they would say, you know, something happened. I would take the time at night to read them little Bible stories that was on cue cards and it would have a little bit of the story, the summary of the story, and it would have Q&A. And we would do that as, that would, soothe them to sleep. And they would, in that Q&A, would discuss some things that took place in school that they had forgotten about, but it disturbed them to the point where it would disrupt their sleep had they not said anything. Because when you're talking to kids about you reading them the Bible stories and everything, they fall asleep. I don't care what you say. It's adults that fall asleep trying to read the Bible. Okay, so they're dozing off and then they're coming back to a full consciousness, and then they'll start telling what happened and what was disturbing about what happened. And my kids would talk to me about anything. They came to me one time and they said, Mom, can we curse on the playground? Can we curse at school? And they knew that, that wasn't something that we conditioned them to do because we raised them according to what we know from the Bible. But they felt comfortable enough to ask that. And I didn't tell them no. I said, I'm not out there. That's between you and God. You have to understand and you have to develop a relationship on your own. And what you do on that playground, I'm not there. I don't know. And yeah, I know a lot of kids out there cursing, and you might want to curse too, and you might want to, kiss people on the playground like the other kids are kissing and do all the stuff that they're doing. And it conflicts with your moral compass as you know it right now. So yeah, I know, right? So it's like they came to me with this information, so I had to be very careful with the way I responded because the conflict may not be as obvious, and my response would definitely be um, deeply impacting their mental ability to one get rest, two perform in school, and three, respond to others on the playground. So I love the fact that you and your daughter have an open discussion, and I'm certain that she feels comfortable talking to you about anything and everything without you going into, chasing the rabbit, going down the rabbit hole and squirrel and all that sort of thing. That's great. Yeah, that's great that that's going on, and I fully encourage you to keep that door open, even with your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, down the line. Keep going because a lot of people need that. A lot of people don't have that, and a lot of my son's friends would come over and visit them at our house, and they would talk to me about things. Even now, my son's friends will talk to me. And again, I have to be extremely cautious of what I'm telling them because I don't want it to conflict with anything their parents may have told them. And I don't want to ask too many questions because it can be perceived as being nosy or trying to know too much, trying to dig too deep. But a lot of times, children bring these conflicts to a trusted adult, and the adult don't know it is that deep. And you know how kids really, they'll be like, oh, it's not that deep. It's not that deep, but it really is that deep. Yes, she does. But it hasn't always been. Hey, things change. Things change. And as children, it's not always a reflection of you and that person, you and your child. It's sometimes a reflection of internal and mental and the conflicts that they're, the outside stimuli, the outside conflicts with interactions with other people. Because my kids, for example, their friends will be like, no, you did not ask your mom that. No, you did not show your mom that. Yeah, guys, they showed me that video, and I've seen worse. I've seen more. I've seen deeper. Yes, my sons will show me them videos, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about those videos that they show, and they may be a little ashamed to say, "Oh, look," but they'll come to me, and we'll be laughing about all of it. I had to step back at first. That's right. You do have to step back and find some common ground sometime. And that's normal. And never take it personal. Never, never take it to heart because it's difficult for people to come to us with what they're going through. It's a mental battle that there's no way I can explain it in just one episode. And it would take a length of time, not just a series, but a length of time because it's a progressive thing and it changes with maturity. And as moral compass changes, moral compass normally changes through experience and through having time for correction, which is vital to maturing and developing. And that's one thing. A lot of times, business organizations and practices and business plans and the isomorphism way and of copying what we believe to be a successful pattern and the absorptive capacity, which is the business way of, basically a computer patch or, you know, fixing it, putting a band-aid on it, it's these patterns. It is patterns. And we have to get beyond these patterns because we can see and we can track where these patterns have loopholes and problems. So we have to just maintain to be, stay on our toes. And the only thing that I've really seen that has been historically successful is again going back to the roots of how business practices, moral, ethical teachings were successful before we started to replace those solid foundations with false or pseudo practices and saying, oh, well, this is the way, this is the cornerstone. It's not. There's one cornerstone, and whether we like it or not, whether we adhere to it or not, this is the way. We can make alterations, but we cannot recreate the wheel. We can make corrections to that foundation, but we can't uh, move that out of the way and let's replace it with this. We can't do that. For example, I was in high school when they began the tradition of um, taking God out of school and replacing it with something else because I said so. Now, if you was in an African American home, because I said so, didn't really last outside of your mama or your whoever said its presence. And that's not going to work with this generation of kids. This generation of kids don't care if it's in your face or behind your back. I said so won't work with them. They must have that true foundation. And that true foundation, rewind, check out what I said, and then come to this point, and then you'll understand that's the true foundation. I can't repeat it because I'm out of time, but I appreciate all the viewers and come back again next week. We'll try to keep pressing through these things despite all the things I'm going through. I'll keep on trying to put this message out there, but this message is something that I've been trying to put out there, and I've put out there in different aspects and different people in different groups, but I'm just one person, and it's really a lot on me to do it like that. And doing it in this virtual reality is a lot easier because all I have to do now, show them the video, show them where to get the video and say, look, go here, here, go there, and they can pull up all these videos and they'll have everything that they need as a foundation to improve or go in the desired uh, way that they're trying to go, but they can't see a way through to get there. So continue to watch these episodes. I'm going to try to keep addressing um, these things that's being brought up indirectly, so I don't expose anybody. I hate it when you go to a church and the person up there says they're a prophet, then they put all your business out on the street, thinking they talking to you, and you're like, wait, you lost me a little bit in some of that when you start to add in some common stuff, common problems that have nothing to do with me, but it might have something to do with me because I'm military spouse. Yeah, so it's like that. It's like, I don't like to put people on front. I don't like to expose people, but I do like to be helpful in a holistic way without excluding anybody who may need this information but cannot ask. Okay, so that's my show for today. Refer a friend, share it, because sharing is caring. And remember, like, subscribe, and ring the bell because it's necessary to ring the bell. If I'm going through some things and I can't get back on, you're going to want to know the next time I'm on. Again, Eddie has episodes that he does that he talks about Black history and the relation as to modern times and modern events and current events. So stay tuned for that. A lot of times I stick more towards things that's helping us mentally because that is vital right along through these times. Okay, so let's keep trying to figure out ways to move forward with positive thoughts, positive progression in mental health, and business practices because business practicing to include school practices because schools again sample from the rest of the world. So rewind, because I said that. I hate to repeat myself, but I know your time is worth a lot. So I'm going to let you go so you can rewind and don't forget to watch those other episodes. Thanks, Jackie. I appreciate that. I always need critique, baby. I always need critique. My sister got me right here. She got me. All right. See you guys next week. And remember, mental health is physical wealth.